Hello, I'm Joshua, and first and foremost, I'd like to say thank you for viewing this video and subsequently visiting my channel. The topic of this video is going to be on a readdressing of origin stories, and I tried to make this video before, and it stayed on my channel for a little bit, and I started the discussion off talking about the Joker movie, the recent one, most recent one, portrayed by where the Joker is portrayed by Joaquin Phoenix, and I proceeded to explain why that movie just misses the point. Not because they are not accurate in their depiction of certain contemporary sociological and societal issues about how people understand the role and the relationship between mental illness, crime, and social policies, but in its actual conception of what makes a character like the Joker emerge, because I think that it does do the right thing in showing that he has mental illness or he is mentally disturbed. But I think that the truer, more better portrayal of a realism, which honestly I have an annoyance with the trend towards realism in film, in the contemporary film landscape, is that if you're going to actually have somebody who is comparable to the criminal Joker as he's understood from the standpoint of Batman the comics, I think Heath Ledger's Joker is much more accurate in terms of their motivation, or what makes the Joker the Joker is the Joker is the Joker. There is not really something else behind him other than sort of a disposition to begin with that has to be fairly unique to the individual, that has to be accounted for in the sense of the origin of the villain itself, in the sense that I would say that the Joker is best thought of as some form of a sociopath, or he is the reason why I wouldn't say the Joker is schizophrenic. I wouldn't say he's has necessarily has bipolar mood disorder, or would be somebody who would be as affable as the Joaquin Phoenix character starts off and then takes a dark plunge into a certain lifestyle, is because it is the case that you can motivate people through large social incentives to commit heinous acts, and it's not necessarily that he commits heinous acts that makes me argue against this, but it's the fact that when you're talking about one individual insisting on committing certain acts, they're of a special category or class of person. There are individuals across like our criminal history that we can see, yeah, there is reason, for instance, why Ted Bundy, Carl Panzram, or uh, Bukowski, or Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, becoming whoever they are. But it's very clear at the same time that they are unique individuals, as in they are outliers or extremes. And if you took the fact that there's a statistical relevance to something being an outlier into consideration about how you're going to depict this character, then you would not actually make this scene of him getting hit by a sign and falling over and all of this wailing and crying, and then suddenly falling into a certain line of activity or thought just merely based on what they experience. I think the film does try to say that, well, he is a certain kind of way, and so this is why he would be motivated to go that way. But I think that the film wanted too much to try and make this story about contemporary issues, and that's why people like it. But it's not at all because it's an actual accurate depiction of an origin story about a character like Joker, the Joker as he would be understood and the comics, or as he would be understood, to say, if with respects to what we understand from criminology about serial killers and high profile criminals. I mean, I know that there have been experts that applaud the Joker movie and the sense of it being more accurate in its depiction of what really makes somebody a criminal. But I think that that's too much grounded in the idea that realism is the point. Realism of realism is not the point, as in realism about the reality of what it's like to be a person with a mental illness in this contemporary landscape, in the way that society reflects and thinks on mental illness. I know that that's like something that an artist is free to do. They're free to have some kind of creative licensing and depicting the character in whatever way they think is relevant. And people always want it to be the case that there's some sort of resonance and empathizing that's going to happen with the character, because those are things that generally sell movies. Those are the things, people seeing themselves portrayed and their psychology in a certain way on the screen is what people want to see. But the truth is, Joker is not like any person. Not like any person, really. He's a character, a comic book character. And if you're going to be real about what the Joker is, he is a statistical outlier in multiple mental categories that we can't even begin to cover. There would never be somebody in real life like the Joker, but if the Joker really was in real life, he is just that way. You're not going to make him that way. You don't depose him and push him towards certain things. You do teach people to be violent. So but then you don't at the same time. So something interesting about the evolution of violence and human activity is that you usually have it the case that by the time a child is 0 to the ages of 2, it's very obvious that they are far more aggressive than other kids. And if it's the case that you want these kids to not grow up to be as aggressive, then you have to find a means of outlet for them to exercise that aggression, like martial arts or sports. And then you have to provide certain networks and systems of reward for them being empathic, sharing, and playing good with other kids. These are kids that you have to give them candy, you have to give them special privileges and treats to incentivize them to play with others. And then over time, as they learn this activity and they have outlets to discharge their aggression, they're going to find out that other kids like them, want to promote their well being, and support them in the social space. And then that extra incentive that they learn by the ages of 3 to be empathic will help by the time they get to the ages of 4 and 5 to understand I fit into a community, and all little 0 to 2 year old kids are narcissistic assholes. And so you basically have to help them learn to be empathic. Other kids, they're just going to learn it because most kids are not necessarily disposed to be that aggressive in their social interactions with other people. But when you have a very aggressive kid, then there are things you have to do. Discipline is one of them, but the discipline that works for them is more so positive reinforcement and outlets, and having very strict boundaries for what they can and can't do with other kids. And that's how you take a aggressive kid and make them not so inclined to be somebody who tends towards antisocial personality disorder, is what people would call it. And so uh, what I think that what is relevant is that you that if you're going to depict something in a movie, it is the case that movies are fantastical. But if you're going to go towards realism, then you would try to get something like the origin of a very anarchistic, murdersome, calculated, charismatic individual, right? Because what's true about his origins is very true about the origins of, say, somebody like Jim Jones. What's always interesting to me is that the Joker is sort of a compilation of a serial killer, a cult leader, and a psychopath. You really wouldn't say that he's one or the other. It's why people can imbue many different sort of mental disorders, and why the movie had to kind of invent a person, I would say it's a mood disorder that he has, that's a mental illness, that has its other affects or whatever, because truth be told, that's, and there's not, like, what he is not really anything you're going to find in the DSM. And so you shouldn't even try to bring something like a construct of the DSM and all these other different things into the story, because they're just going to make it a bunch of bullshit. To me, a bunch of bullshit, because it's like you shouldn't believe that origin stories really are what we think that they are, because a lot of what makes a normal person in terms of behavior, because we have to realize that motivation does not necessarily determine behavior. Motivation is one feature of psychology. Behavior is another goddamn whole sort of mess. It's a much more infinitely complex. And when you're asking why does like a person who is a self-organizing system tend towards a certain way of being, then it's like we have a different set of parameters to consider. And when you're talking about a statistical outlier, you have to make sure that you keep in mind that they are the fucking outlier. They are not the norm. In the sense that, yes, a lot of people, if you abuse them, you constantly push them and shove them, then there's a breaking point. Like Breaking Bad, it's clear that a story like that, people like it, but it's kind of a little fuzzy on the lines because it's a story. So don't get me wrong, like it's a story. It's not necessarily supposed to be scientifically accurate. It doesn't have to be. It's about being entertaining, I guess. And so it's fair. That's fair for what it is. But I would say at the same time that when people start reflecting on the story and start thinking about what does the story mean with respects to reality and society and the way that it's construed, let's be fucking honest. The Joker is the Joker in the sense that Ted Bundy is Ted Bundy. There is not something that makes these people these ways other than the fact that they're born this way. I hate to say it, but Ted Bundy was not normal. His family wasn't normal. It's not the case that the atypicality is any reason, an atypicality in most instances and scenarios, banning like some kind of tragic accident. So if somebody's exposed to lead poisoning, mercury poisoning, they sustain a very severe like head injury or something like that, then yeah, there's clear like, or they develop a lesion on their brain, or there's a lot of medical marvels that can happen, or tragic accidents that can depose somebody towards violent and aggressive behavior where it would not have manifested itself in that way to begin with, barring that behavior. But it looks like this. It does take certain conditions to get a sociopath. A sociopath is not quite like a psychopath, but a sociopath is not normal or typical. What is best to describe a sociopath as in terms of accurate language, as we understand it in the modern conception of psychology and the DSM, is somebody who's deposed to antisocial personality disorder. And people who are deposed to antisocial personality disorder are deposed to antisocial personality disorder. There's not a heads or tails about, whether or not they're not all going to become raving killers or lunatics or something like that, but they will be manipulative. They will look to exploit other people and get their way. They will tend to have just consistent bridges of relationships burned and burned and burned and burned over time. And though there are many different ways that this behavior can arise symptomatically in a person, such as an individual experiencing abuse and having low levels of trust and agreeability being a part of their personality, that is not necessarily the same thing as somebody who is has antisocial personality disorder. I've seen so many people who have antisocial personality disorder at this point in time in my life that I know that, look, there's a difference between a person who uh, likes to, I wouldn't say likes to, but has an instinct towards manipulation and aggression. People who have a particular instinct or inclination towards manipulation and aggression, they're not, what would you say, normal. That's not to say that somebody who experiences abuse, people who fight, who get into fights, are not necessarily antisocial. And this difficult thing with talking about these things is that everybody has these kinds of characteristics to varying degrees. So, what one would say about any one kind of personality disorder is that it is the extreme representation of certain cognitive features that are normal to people in general. If you some people, if you beat the hell out of them, they're just going to give up. They're going to curl up and they're not going to do anything. They're going to lose their will to live and possibly commit suicide or inflict harm on themselves. Other people, you do the same thing, that then they may take it out on other people. Um, Other people, if you do that, they go around killing people. And we have to be very clear in the sense that people who practice criminality, one thing. People who produce or acts in self-harming and self-sabotaging ways, one thing. People who go around killing people, whole another deal. It's not sorry, I know. Like, everybody has the capacity to kill another person. But the reason why it's important to understand that when you have somebody in our society in particular who goes around killing people, that's that person is atypical, is because it's not normal. It's not normal. It's not about whether or not it's normal for human beings, because people like that in the Roman Empire, for instance, where it is normal to kill people, they would have the highest rate of killing people out of all people. They would be the statistical outliers for numbers of people killed. So the person like that, it doesn't matter what culture you put them in, whether it's okay to kill people and for what reason it's okay to kill people, they are going to be the outliers when it comes to how often they kill people. People like that are unique. They're very, 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 very unique. And we have to understand that beliefs like absolute power corrupts absolutely. Bullshit. It doesn't. There's just a certain profile or template of person in terms of motivation that's attracted to certain activities or to certain positions of power. And what power does is allow a person to express themselves. When people get to go places where no one knows them and they get to act out whatever the hell they want, trust me, that's just their behavior as it's been conditioned over time, given the temperamental inclinations and grooves and characters of that little self-organizing thing that they are. But everybody has a set of initial conditions, whether people like this or not. It's the truth. There's a set of initial conditions, and they're just kind of going to spin themselves out towards the individual that you see in that space whenever they're allowed to be free and to express themselves unfettered. And anytime you let people be free to express themselves unfettered, even people you think that are necessarily good people may not behave nobly, because a lot of what morality is for us is based on certain aspects of empathy. So you need empathy to be moral, and go fucking figure. So that's what everybody's talking about. But you also need reputation, because it's when people are keeping track of one another. You need empathy, reputation, and a system of punishment and reward to motivate people to be moral. When it's outside of them relating to their familial collusion. And even then, people come with so much variation that you need the same thing within homes to make sure that certain kids don't wind up being like the scourge of the community or something like that. Because there are many different things as to why a kid will become a potential trouble. Everything from high IQ to hyperactivity. And a person who could be hyperactive could become a criminal very easily, because our society doesn't, especially the school systems, they don't do so well with kids who have high motor functioning. And so, it's the case that they could be deposed towards finding themselves on the outer reaches of society and moving towards a lifestyle from out in those outer reaches of society to have some sense of identity and belonging that they cannot find within normal society or within their normal peer group. But is that person going to become Ted Kaczynski? Is that person going to become Ted Bundy? Is that person going to become Carl Spanzram? Is that person going to become David Bukowski? Is that person going to become any whatever? No, not necessarily. 9 out of 10 times, no. Even with chance involved, not very often. Because what you have are probabilistic likelihoods. And whether people want to talk, when people are investigating criminality, in the statistics of like the likelihood of it, there are certain trends you have to accept as outlying. They're just not normal, even for the people who practice certain things. So, for instance, killers, people who kill people, usually a person who kills a person, they kill one person, and will that person be likely to kill again? Yeah, because they've already like committed to the action, and the brain has a dopaminergic incentive for rewarding somebody for being aggressive. Go figure. Well, so sorry I laugh because it's the truth. Look, because something about sociality and dominance. All people care about status, and status has a certain correlate which we'll just call dominance. And exerting dominance or getting revenge or satisfying envy and jealousy, oh yeah, it's gonna feel good. And so once you get a person to experience these things and understand that they have the option to do this, and that they could potentially get away with it, oh yeah, some people are going to be inclined to do it. People who would do it in the first place, they're going to be inclined to do it. But let's be honest, because there are certain factors like IQ, how charismatic a person is, wealth, and all other sorts of things, like the Joker's taking care of his sick grandma. Like, no, fuck no, the Joker would not take care of his sick grandma. Like, that's not. We have a real emotional obsession with like empathizing with people right now, and it's like, no, the Joker is not someone you could normally empathize with from the understanding of being a highly relational person, because God, I'm gonna throw the book at you, cat. It's like, you have to understand that, no, it's like there are limitations to this exercise, because there are realities in terms of the actual psychological and material consequences of such a person existing or being in the world that I feel we ignore, because intuitively we have notions like people have free will, or that absolute power corrupts absolutely. And it's like, no, it doesn't. Absolute power does not corrupt absolutely. The only thing that absolute power does is give the person the ability to express themselves. And even when people are free to express themselves and virtually get away with whatever, some people are very conscious about the way people respond to them, what their image is perceived as, and what people think about them. A lot of the very immoral guerrilla tactics that you hear happening behind the scenes with politicians is about competition between politicians. It's not really about trying to mislead the public or whatever. And even when it comes to politicians doing corrupt things, it is only like about 10% or 2% of politicians that produce a majority of the corruption within the system. It's not all. But if you think that all politicians are moral or like whatever, human beings are not inherently moral. What I'm going to say is this, that fundamentally what we have here is a very gross misunderstanding of human psychology. And because I'm a person, clearly I have this channel that's devoted in some respects to understanding human psychology, things like this annoy me, because I think that, well, look, people can make their mythologies and their religions all they want. Let's just be frank that we're making like religions and mythologies around things, and that we're not trying to like tell the truth or like have even the best story. Because I couldn't enjoy the Joaquin Phoenix Joker movie because I thought, you know what's wrong with this? You know what's wrong with this? You know what's wrong with this? Throughout the whole damn viewing. And it's great that we have like a constituency of people who feel affirmed in their struggle for for society to be fair towards people who have mental illness. Granted, but god damn it, does everything have to become a fucking ideological campaign? Can't we just have it the case that we tell a good story and let the story be what the story is? And if you allow a story to be what a story is, because stories come from our experience of the world, then it's going to mean something to people and they're going to find it interesting, at least the people who would watch it. Because origin stories in general are just bullshit. People are non-linear organizing things. We are just that. Trying to understand like why somebody does something is a very, 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 very difficult thing. Even when people can look at the brains of murderers under MRIs, they don't know why their brains are what they are. We know that there has to be something of a dynamic of the interplay between their early childhood experiences, their genetic template, and what it is that they experience throughout their lifetime, because most people don't most 4-year-olds don't go around killing things, but there are 2, 3, and 4-year-olds who do. And oftentimes those 2, 3, and 4-year-olds who do, they are just that way. You're not going to do anything about it. Like Ted Bundy was murdering squirrels. It seems to be the case that those kinds of people, they are just going to kill whatever they can. And once they become big enough to kill adult people, and it seems interesting enough, or they have like the opportunity to, they take it. That's what really seems to be the story. And what always baffles the fuck out of me is like, how the hell is it me, somebody who is actually going to school for mathematics and philosophy, can fucking understand that, look man, there's just like limitations to the way it is we can think about psychology and what it means to be human, to understand that there is not a grand shebang of empathy that can be given to everybody who commits atrocious and heinous acts. There is no reason to try and humanize these individuals in the way in which we do. I think what's best is thinking of them as like WWE characters or something like that. You don't like The Undertaker because you're trying to empathize with him. You like The Undertaker because you think he's cool, interesting, or edgy or something like that. Like, the reason why I pay attention to Ted Bundy is because he is edgy. He's interesting. He's an interesting goddamn son of a something. But... like, is it the case that I have any empathy for Ted Bundy or Ted or Bukowski or Carl Panzram or anything like that? No, because I know Robert Sapolsky actually thinks of this very rationally as well. They're like broken cars. Do you fault the car? No. But do you have empathy for the car either? No. Like that's stupid. Like, you need to put the car on cinder blocks. It doesn't have any brakes. It just doesn't have them. Like, all other cars have the brakes. They don't have it. Like, they do not have it. And it's not their fault. And it's not something, you can't rehabilitate them. There's no reason to think that there is certainly a need for people to be more empathic to, say, people with bipolar mood disorder. There is a need for people to be more empathic to people who have Down syndrome. There's a need for people to be more empathic to people who have schizophrenia. There's a need for people to be more empathic to certain individuals. But when we try to like blindly like apply the label to everybody who sits in camp, we got some fucking issues. Because look, the reason why we pay attention to serial killers is not the same reason why we think that it's wrong to abuse somebody or tell somebody they can't do something just because they happen to be born a certain way. Those are very different things. Now, it's the case that you may say, well, Joshua Hell like is killing moral and immoral or whatever. It's problematic. So for instance, like I was saying before, if you put that person in the Roman Empire where they can just kill people pretty much so long as they can get away with it, or at war, that person is going to have so many kills, so it's not even funny. That person may even murder the soldier next to them just because they have a dispute or a conflict. And it's not to say that didn't happen, but it's like when the numbers get to a certain degree, that starts to become problematic. You don't have an army anymore. when that person thinks like, I want to go kill these people, and you're like, no, we need you to do this assignment, and they think, oh, I'm gonna go kill my supervisors because they're not gonna let me go kill these people, and that's what I really want to do for whatever reason because I want to. Okay, then you can't fight a war. There's just like, and you may say, well, who the fuck cares about war? Oh, fine, put them in normal society and see how many people stay alive living around their house. It's like suddenly the number of people are just going to disappear or whatever around the block because people are not inherently moral. We're not that. We're social, and that means that we want to, generally normal people want to get along with other people. That's a motivation we all generally have. But when people don't have that, then I'm going to put it, there's nothing really stopping them other than other people. And that's why all people can practice violence, because violence in terms of human behavior sprung up for many different reasons. Take the classical film of Frankenstein. It wasn't the case that we always had police officers. We were policing one another for a very, very, very long time. And for a very, very long time, when killers got into communities, the only thing that happened was a giant mob rose up to kill them. And that was the only way to stop them. And so guess what? People have a capacity for violence because violence is used as a deterrent. It's used as a tool of punishment. It's used as a tool of revenge. It's used as a tool of many different damn things. Dominance, a whole bunch of things. Because what it means to be human is fairly complicated. We've been on this planet for a very, very, very long time. We've had societies and been interacting with one another for a very, very long time. The reason why people are violent is lots of reasons. And so because things are like this, whenever we try to come up with like, oh, this is a story that just like tells whatever, and we don't like frame it that this is a certain perspective and that this is more so a take on mental illness and maybe the way in which we very so misunderstand people with mental illness and cause societally problems for these individuals that would not be there otherwise if we were more fair, empathic, and rational about our choices and decisions. But that's not what the Joker is. And so it is like that, but it is like that. It is like that. But at the same time, it's not like that. And so it's the side of it, it's the gross, ugly side of it that's not like that on all of the false assumptions that it's rested upon that I tend to take issue with. And there is never going to be a perfect movie, but the movie wasn't so good that it made me say like, well, these things that are wrong with it, who cares? Because like there are things wrong with Star Wars, and there's things wrong with like Taxi Driver, and there's things wrong with like Tarkovsky films, and there's things wrong. Like it's not fucking, the point isn't facts. Facts are not the fucking point of art. So like it's not like completely as factually accurate, but it's like, to me, if you're not gonna be that, then you have to be like, I like the movie The Fantastic Mr. Fox. Like, I know a lot of people don't like Wes Anderson films, but I like Wes Anderson films. And the reason why I like Wes Anderson films is because there's no goddamn realism in there. It's just good art to me. Interesting art is good art to me, so it's not necessarily like something more than interesting. If something can be interesting, but to a degree that it overshadows like its errors, then it gets a pass in my book. There's like a lot of movies I watch that I think other people wouldn't watch because, like Cannibal Holocaust, it is a pretty cheesy, corny movie, but it's entertaining and interesting to me, even though it's like that. And I'm not one of those people who just like dislikes things just because I care about facts or I care about logic or rationality. I don't think that logic and rationality are the point of life, but there's just a way to do it, and I don't think that just the Joker movie did it well, and I understand why people don't like it. I think that the actual criticisms that it's going to encourage that kind of behavior is fucking stupid. It's the same logic that the Joker applies, that's applied to the Joker movie applies to the origin of the Joker, that's misapplied to understanding human behavior of people. Because look, people use I'm going to tell it to you right now, people use their ideas, their beliefs, and feelings no. I would say their ideas and beliefs as an excuse to express themselves. They already have, like, we learn things, certainly, and we all have it the case that we attune our behavior towards effective outcomes, and we certainly, like, care to get along with others, and to for the most part, most people just care to get along with others and manage their life and be satisfied in whatever it is that they can, or just make it survive. We all kind of have this like little matrix going. Well, for the most part, almost all people, I should say, have this matrix of whatever. At the very bottom will commit suicide or at whatever. And a lot of people won't even commit suicide. So it's just, look, what makes human beings what they are is just we are what we are. A lot of our beliefs or our ideas are excuses. Not excuses in the sense that we consciously make them up to like excuse our actions, but is it the case that Hitler wrote Mein Kampf because like what would I say? Young was right. Ideas have people. People don't have ideas. The reason why ideas have people is because their ideas emerge from ourselves. They're a function of our psychology rather than being aspects of the world in some like absolute sense. And so that's why ideas have people, because they're aspects of our psychology that emerge and pop up and say, hey, I'm here. And then we act on them, or we provide some rationale or inhibit our acting on them. And that's what really it means to be human. And that's why whenever you're looking at somebody like the Joker, no fucking way is that person like, like, no, not in any way, like not in any way. And I think the reason why professional psychologists will like endorse the movie is because, let's be honest, they want notoriety and they want their books to sell. And so if they can expand their platform and talk on something that there's a lot of views like circling around or people care about, they're gonna do it. I know I'm kind of doing the same thing by talking about this, but let's be honest, it's really not about the Joker. It's just about, like, the Joker is just an example of this woefully wrong way in thinking. And so that's the reason why I talk about it, but not necessarily because I care about the Joker movie necessarily. Though I obviously am a nerd, so in certain ways. So yeah, I do like comic books and things like that, but this is not the point. That's not the point of this movie. Not fucking movie. Video. Oh, I'm so glad I'm a philosopher who can laugh at himself sometimes. I get shit wrong, whatever. Anyways, the point is, like, no. The answer is just no. That's what I'm going to say. So that's my video, and thank you for watching. It's just a revisit of why origin stories are bullshit. It's just bullshit because there are so many things you have to consider as to why people do things or why people become who they are in the end. But the one thing you know fundamentally, no matter what any person becomes or decides to do with themselves, initial conditions, they matter. And once you have a certain constellation of initial conditions, the only thing you have is the effect size of their activity. The person who goes around killing 10, 20, 15 people, 30 people, or whatever, they would kill more. The only reason they don't is because there is not the incentive to, and there's the societal pressures trying to prevent people from doing so. It's not easy for them to do so. There's not very many opportunities that are going to manifest themselves in life. But you know this, that if the person is willing to go and make the opportunities for themselves, my God, they're fucking motivated to do it in a way that you just won't ever fucking understand because you're not like that. Don't assume that these people are like you. Like, don't empathize with them because they're not like you. They're atypical. What makes somebody atypical may not mean somebody doesn't have like the same emotions as other people or whatever. Atypicality has very many different representations and features. There's not a one-size-fit-all in terms of like handling atypicality, but the atypicality of the person that goes around murdering a bunch of people is the atypical of like, no, the only thing you can do is decide whether or not you want to kill that person or lock them away because you know, those sayings may sound so cruel or whatever, but it's just like it's the truth. Like, you have to understand that nature, it says, okay, I'm conservative, but I like to roll the dice because the helix is a very unstable molecule. And so when things are getting arranged and just nature is deciding what to switch on or turn on based on what we experience in our environment and what happens in the womb and the development of ourselves in our mother's womb, it's just like, no, there's not free will. That's not going on here. definitely people make choices and we have the capacity to make decisions, but they're not free will. And so when some people, not in the way, it's not to say that people have no freedom or no will whatsoever. It's to say that it's not completely free. There's a great deal of limitations and constrictions on what we can be or what we're going to do in life, or even become. All of these things are true. And those have, and that has this, it's a whole nother video with the other consequences in the discussion. But it is not to say that, like, look, man, like, look, the Joker is the Joker. And that's all he is. There's no other rationale for the Joker being the Joker other than the Joker is a Joker. Like, there may be something interesting about the psychology of the Joker. Like, I would love to see a Joker movie where somebody did, like, a real lengthy study on psychopaths, cult leaders, and people with antisocial personality disorders, and the Batman comics, and then came up with the representation of the Joker. That would be freaking, like, amazing to behold to me. To me, that would probably be better than the Christopher Nolan version of the Joker, which was a form of realism, but I thought his ideal of realism was more accurate to, like, the character in the comic book, more so than the Joaquin Phoenix version. So hopefully that wasn't too complicated. But that's what I think about, the bullshit of origin stories. And these are just examples that I'm using to illustrate why the idea and the model breaks down woefully around these topics. So that's my video, and thank you for watching.